It was a genuinely shocking cut-down day for the Green Bay Packers. We weren't even going to do this show, but things went so weirdly, we had to. So let's do it.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts. You will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This is one of the more bizarre cut-down days I can remember. And what is truly remarkable about that is we had a weird trade yesterday. Like to go out and go get Malik Willis when, by the way, the Cleveland Browns kept 4 quarterbacks. You have to believe Tyler Huntley or Dorian Thompson-Robinson or Jameis Winston could have been had in a trade. Now, not for a 7th round pick, potentially. Understand that. But that, to me, seemed like the weird thing. And then it was more or less fait accompli that Sean Clifford and Michael Pratt were each going to be left off this final 53-man roster. So that wasn't even the bizarre part. We get some reporting from Bill Huber over at Sports Illustrated that Sean Clifford is expected, if he clears waivers, to be back on the practice squad. Just a bit of housekeeping on that. Remember, they cannot put the practice squad together until the players who are subject to waivers, aka not vested veterans, have to be gone through that process. And so we won't know who has cleared waivers. There's always some claims, a handful of them. There's not as many as you would think, honestly. And we won't know until Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, what this practice squad is going to look like. So we're not even going to worry about that for the moment. So this quarterback situation aside, the first shocker, or at least the biggest one, is A.J. Dillon. His career in Green Bay is likely over. And I can't figure out exactly why. Not about the quality of the player. They didn't have to put him on season-ending IR. He could have gone on IR and be designated to return. Now, one of two things is true. Either they were going to just flat out cut him and couldn't because he's injured, or he's more injured than we realize. That this stinger, which is what they've been calling it, is more than that. It's a more serious neck injury, which would be brutal. It'd be brutal for A.J. Dillon. And you would worry about career threatening in a situation like that. And so that's what makes this even more surprising, is we had no idea that was the situation that they were in. Now, Marshawn Lloyd made the final 53 after it looked like there was some speculation that I guess was not reporting. It was taken by a lot of people as reporting. I took it as Rob Demovsky had the report, and we talked about this yesterday. He was given a list. There was a list of intel items, and he said Marshawn Lloyd is expected to go to IR. And a lot of people, I would say myself included, took that to mean that Rob knew something about that. He's a very connected beat reporter. If he says expected to go to IR, like that's just the kind of thing that if you say that, I assume that means you know he's going to do that, or at least are pretty sure that that's what's going to happen. Now that's not a criticism at all on Rob. Like let's not do that. That's not what this is. It's just more that we thought that was going to happen, and that's not what ended up happening. It turns out he's going to be on this roster, and that means that you hope he's closer to contributing than maybe we realized. it's also true that you want the rookie to get the reps, the mental reps. Even if he can be doing only individual work, that's useful for the Packers as he gets up to speed, because Marshawn Lloyd, especially if A.J. Dillon is not going to be on this team, and he's not, that's going to be an essential part of this offense. Emmanuel Wilson is going to get those carries, but Marshawn Lloyd is going to get some significant part of this offense at some point, because Josh Jacobs is going to miss time or Emmanuel Wilson is going to miss time. That's just the way this works. You keep 3 running backs for a reason. Now, in terms of some of the other things that people found surprising, we're going to get into some of the decisions, why they happened later. But just from I can't believe this happened. Anthony Johnson Jr., and I know he's safety 4, was left off in favor of Zane Anderson, presumably for special teams benefit. And I don't quite understand that, except that it seems clear that Rich Bisaccia has gotten a lot of input and a lot of sway in that room. We're going to talk about whether or not that's a good thing a little bit later. But the leaving off of Kalen King, for example, that to me it's surprising, but it speaks more to the quality of a player like Javon Bullard, who can play in the slot. Xavier McKinney can play in the slot, even though you're not going to move him to the slot. He's someone who, if you want to play some more 3 safety looks, if let's say Keyshawn Nixon goes down, you can do that. And you can even switch. This is one of the reasons why, and everydayers are sick of me talking about this. It's why I love the idea of playing a bunch of 3 safety looks, because you never know who's going to be deep. Are they going to play deep half? Are they going to play in the deep middle? Are they going to play overhang? Are they going to play in the slot? Like, where are these guys going to be? It gives them so much flexibility to have guys like Xavier McKinney and Javon Bullard. And there's no question that someone like Javon Bullard and someone like Evan Williams, because Evan Williams can fill in for Javon Bullard if Javon Bullard needs to play the slot, that contributed to them saying, well, do we really need a backup slot corner when that's all he is and he's not really a contributor on special teams? That seems to be the distinction that they drew there. Now, it's also interesting to me that Robert Rochelle did not make this team. I thought as a special teams player, he had a lot of value. I really liked how he looked as a backup corner in the preseason. They have Eric Stokes, who's been hurt the last 2 years. They have Carrington Valentine, who was a rookie last year and has been hurt all camp. And they have Jerry Alexander, who has had 2 serious injuries in the last 3 seasons. I would think they'd want more outside corner help than just Corey Ballantyne, and yet that's not the direction that they went. To me, there was not really any particularly glaring omissions here. Like Christian Welch, it's a bummer that he didn't make the team. I'm not surprised he didn't make the team. He did everything he could. Like this was the definition of it's not you, it's me from the Green Bay Packers side. Like Christian Welch did everything they could have wanted, and you hope you can get that guy back on the practice squad. I wouldn't be surprised if a team said, we want that guy. We want that guy. Because we don't have 2, top 100 pick rookies in our linebacker room, plus a core special teamer, a former first round pick, and then a guy who played in our defensive coordinator system. The Packers, this was just a numbers game. Now, the last bit that was surprising to me, the offensive line. To keep Kadeem Telfort and Travis Glover on this team, to go 10 and to keep both of those guys, that tells me they don't have faith in either of them. But they know Andre Dillard cannot play right tackle. He's a swing tackle, and he's a very good left tackle swing tackle. There's value in having him be that. I think they would like to upgrade there. In fact, the other piece of reporting that was source reporting, no doubt it was sourced reporting, Rob Bukowski said that there is an internal feeling that their veteran swing tackle that they'd like to have is not on the roster. I thought that might mean Andre Dillard gets cut. He stays. They end up keeping 2 developmental offensive linemen on the roster. Caleb Jones off the roster. Maybe he lands on the practice squad, but I think that experiment is over. I think that is a tacit understanding and agreement that this experiment is over. That Kadeem Telfort and Glover, those are your developmental offensive linemen. Now they're your hopefully your future Yosh Nijmans, and you hope that one of them can become the swing tackle or the backup right tackle that you need them to be. Whether or not they can actually do that week one, that's a pretty big question. Now, if you go back over the last few years, you can see the fingerprints. Guys, don't worry. We are going to talk about the kicking game. You can see the fingerprints of Rich Bisaccia. And so far, we have very little, scant evidence that this is working. And yet, he has huge influence over the way this team is being put together. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to save money on tickets. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. They've got big time Labor Day offers right now. Save more when you buy late because the prices on Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to, let's say, first pitch if you're looking to get into a baseball game. Plus, all-in prices allows you to see your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off that first ticket purchase. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insights on the best fantasy draft strategies. My draft is tonight, so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In 2021, special teams cost the Green Bay Packers their season. We know what that looked like. They were 31st in DVOA. They were 32nd. They were 31st last year in DVOA. In 2022, you go, okay, they took a step forward, 17th in special teams DVOA. And it wasn't for, it's just some fluke. In 2022, the reason their special teams were so good is Keyshawn Nixon. Well, what happened with Keyshawn Nixon? Keyshawn Nixon was brought in to play gunner, to cover kicks, and to compete in the slot. Amari Rodgers was the returner. Rich Bisaccia needed to be waterboarded to bench Amari Rodgers, and it was to the point that he had to be cut. It got so bad because he could not hang on to the ball. They lucked into the best part of their special teams over the last 3 years since Rich Bisaccia came on board and even before. So if we include this year, you go back and you look at that 2022 draft. They draft Tariq Carpenter. I know, 7th round pick. Tariq Carpenter, that was a special teams selection. Could not play. Dallin Leavitt was a special teams signing. Could not stay on the roster. You go back and you look at that 2023 draft. I said draft because Anders Carlson. You go back and you look. Brian Gutekunst has, in an effort to fix the special teams, drafted long snappers in the past. Brutal. Don't do that. Don't draft kickers ever. And you can tell the influence that Rich Bisaccia has had, not only in the draft room, but in the approach that the team is taking. It is clear that someone like Zane Anderson made this team solely because of their special teams, when Anthony Johnson Jr. is someone who is safety 4. Like, that guy's probably going to have to play at some point for the Green Bay Packers. And when he does, it's going to be Zane Anderson, not Anthony Johnson Jr., when I have not seen anything to suggest that Zane Anderson is the second coming of Matthew Slater, which is what he would have to be, or something close to it, to justify a materially better defensive player not making the squad for special teams reasons. Anders Carlson was handpicked by Rich Bisaccia, in part because Rich coached Anders' brother. It has been a nightmare. Anders Carlson got cut yesterday. Now, spending a 6th round pick on a kicker is not the end of the world, but they took Rich Bisaccia's word for it, and it's been a disaster class. There is no reason to believe that this is getting better. Last year, when Keyshawn Nixon was not killing it for a kick return group that, didn't exactly inspire the world. He had some big returns, had the big one in the playoffs, but was not what he was in 2022 when he was the most dangerous return man. He was a true weapon in the return game. There's a reason they were 31st in DVOA, and part of it was they were not the same return group. They were still getting punts blocked, kicks blocked. And this kicker that Rich Bisaccia handpicked stinks. Terrible. Is no longer on the roster. So why exactly? What has Rich Bisaccia shown in Green Bay? I understand. Beloved figure. Matt LaFleur leans on him, loves him as a confidant. But that was true of Joe Barry too. The guy could not coach. And Rich Bisaccia was considered one of the good special teams coaches. When he was elevated in Las Vegas, there were players on that team saying, we want Rich to be our head coach. Not exactly a vote of confidence for Antonio Pierce, given the way the last few years have gone. And when you look at his special teams units, and Wendell Ferreira is someone who has talked about this, they've actually never been that great. He's not someone that creates elite special teams. We're not talking about Dave Tao. And so, okay, if he's not, because think about it. It was, we want the starters to play more on special teams. And then it was actually, we're going to use more draft capital and free agent resources on special teams only or special teams mostly players. Keyshawn Nixon, one of them, they fell ass backward into Keyshawn Nixon, all-pro returner. That wasn't even the plan. They didn't know that was a thing that was going to happen. They had no idea. And now it's actually, we got to give up roster spots from guys who could help the team on defense or offense. But no, it's got to be about the special teams, even though the special teams still sucks out loud. Why are we listening to Rich Bisaccia at this point? Where's the evidence that this is working, that this plan is working? I see zero. I see none. So when I see someone like, and this is not even a shot at Zane Anderson, but when I see that happen, I go, that's a Rich Bisaccia decision, and I don't trust it. Why would I? Why should I? I have no reason to. I can explain some of these other decisions. I can explain, Keaton Oladapo making it in that safety room instead of Anthony Johnson Jr. I get it. Keaton Oladapo was a more recent draft pick and a higher draft pick. And so, okay, I get it. AJJ was a 7th round pick. But he also, the last time we saw him on a football field, looked really good. And I believe in his ability. Now, they may feel differently. They may not think that his defensive ability is where I think it is, but I was higher on him pre-draft, I think, than the Packers were, or they wouldn't have waited till the 7th round to draft him. I thought he was a borderline top 100 type player in the pre-draft process. So that's coloring my opinion on this too, but I just don't see the reason to have faith that this is going to go well when it hasn't. It hasn't gotten any better. And the one key decision that was made was an accident. Or at least the best decision that was made was an accident. The biggest decision was this kicker that went ingloriously. It cost them a chance to go to the NFC Championship game and potentially a Super Bowl because Anders Carlson was your kicker and not someone who would be better because Anders was the worst kicker in football last year. Rich Bisaccia is on the clock with this. At least on Locked On Packers. I don't know if he is internally. I doubt he is internally. But, and look, Matt LaFleur, this is not the segment that we're doing, but there's a lot of pressure on Jeff Hafley too. Matt LaFleur does not have a great track record of hiring non-offensive assistants. Defensive coordinator has not been great. Special teams coordinators have been a nightmare. Let's see you get it done, Matt. All right, where do the Packers go from here now that they have let's call it a first draft of their final 53-man roster? We'll talk about it next on Locked On Packers. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Get daily insights to the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in your description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So where do the Packers go from here? Are there other moves? Remember last year they had a final 53 quote. It's really a first 53. It is final cuts, but then there's always roster maneuvering. Players get released. The Packers go, oh, I like that guy. Or after a couple of days of practice, you go, maybe we need to make a phone call about someone. I don't expect the Packers to be doing anything quarterback-wise. I think if they believed Ryan Tannehill was the best solution for them from a cost-effectiveness standpoint, that they would have made that move already. That if they believed giving up more draft capital than they gave up for Malik Willis to go get Tyler Huntley or Jameis Winston, assuming those guys are even available. And I don't think we can safely assume that given the way the Browns season went last year. They would have already done that. So then the question becomes, do you need a veteran running back? Emmanuel Wilson has never been a frontline player in his NFL career. Not really. Not for any consistent period of time. And he's going to be running back 2 this year. There are guys out there, speaking of the Browns, Devontae Foreman. It's a nice player. Could he make sense in Green Bay? I think they really like what Marshawn Lloyd gives them. You hope that he's going to be healthy sooner rather than later. I've said before, I think he's someone who you can scheme up touches for and not really worry about too much. So if they believe in Emmanuel Wilson, they're fine. They do need to get another running back. Maybe it's going to be Nate McCreary, someone like that, on this practice squad. We'll see what that looks like, but that is part of the fortification of this group that they're going to need to do. Ditto at offensive line. Are they going to be able to find someone? We talked about some options yesterday. They are few and far between. This is ultimately why I think they doubled up at offensive line. It's because they said, I don't think we're going to be able to find someone to come in here and be a veteran swing tackle. So we just got to live with Andre Dillard on the left side and then figure it out with Telfort and Glover. And it's not the worst solution. Like you see the flashes with both of those guys. You see in preseason, especially in the run game, kicking ass, getting downhill. Those are big, powerful dudes. So just be good enough. Give some tight end help in the passing game. Can you do that on 3rd and 8? No, on an island, it's going to be a problem. You have to at least explore the veteran market there, but that's a tough market. Kicker is a place that's going to be much easier. There's just always more guys. There are like 2 kickers in the NFL who are awesome, and then everyone else is between kicker 3 and 50, and there's very little difference between any of them. Most of them are extremely inconsistent. So if you can find an upgrade over Greg Joseph, go do that. I said on a Bleacher Report stream yesterday, here's what I want out of a kicker. Someone asked me, look, what are the expectations? What do you want? I said, here's what I want if your offense is good. The only thing you need from your kicker is to make the kicks he absolutely has to make. In the first quarter, you don't need to go up 3-0. That's not the end of the world if you miss a kick like that. You don't need 10-7 or it's 14-7 and you miss a kick in the third quarter and you're still down a touchdown. Not the end of the world. What you need to do is you need that 3 points to go up 7 or to go up better, to go up 8, to go up 9 in the fourth quarter, to go up 2 in the fourth quarter. Game on the line to make the game-winning kick. That's the kick you have to make. And that's what Mason Crosby did. I think there's been a lot of hagiography when it comes to Mason Crosby that somehow he was like this Justin Tucker level kicker because we loved him and he was in Green Bay forever and he made these monster kicks in Dallas in the playoffs that we'll always remember, the 50-plus yarders, absolute nails in that moment. We're talking about a guy who had a career field goal percentage worse than Anders Carlson had last year. He was not like Gary Anderson in 2001 or whenever that was when he was perfect. That's not the player that Mason Crosby was. But what did he do? In the big moments, you trusted him to make those kicks. 49ers, 2021, drive them down the field. You got to kick a 40-plus yarder. Bang, down the middle. That is what you need. This offense is going to be really, really good. Really, really good. If your kicker is, league average is about 86% on field goals. If your kicker is 84% or 82%, it's not the end of the world game to game, drive to drive. What you need is the guy who can make the clutch kicks. I went back and looked over the last 2 years. So, by the way, Greg Joseph set the record in 2022 for game-winning field goals. Set the record on a totally fraudulent Vikings team, but time after time after time, they gave him opportunities at the end of games, and he delivered. I went back and looked last year. Speaking of make the kicks you need to make. In 0 games over the last 2 seasons, when Greg Joseph missed a kick, 0 games, did it matter in terms of winning and losing. In fact, they won every game last year that he missed a kick. That's remarkable, but also it tells you he made the ones he needed to make. And there wasn't a game where he missed a kick and then all of a sudden, 16 things happen. Or it's not, you don't have to parse the data too deeply to see when he needed to make the kicks, he made the kicks over the last 2 years. You can go back to 2021, I believe. He missed a chip shot field goal to beat the Cardinals on the road in Arizona. 30-some yarder. Missed it right. Then he bounced back and had the most clutch season, regular season of the last 5 years in the NFL from a kicker. So that's what I want in a kicker. Make those clutch kicks. Make the kicks you have to make. And that was why I was excited. That's why I had a lot of respect for Joseph in Minnesota. And it was why I couldn't believe that they were just like, we're going to move on from him. I knew he was not super consistent. But I also know what 2022 looked like. I saw him make those big kicks. And to me, I want that more than anything else, especially for a really good offense, which is what the Packers are going to be. Can they find a kicker that's better than Greg Joseph? Maybe. You got to explore that opportunity. But I think this is the team, more or less. And I think this team is really, really good. I think they're really, really good. One name I have to shout out. Aaron Mosby. Hell yeah to Aaron Mosby. Terrific in the preseason. He's a different type of rusher. I've been talking about this for years. All these guys, speed to power, speed to power, speed to power. Bull rushers, Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness, Kingsley Enagbare, Preston Smith, power rushers. Preston can bend the edge, but he's getting older. Aaron Mosby, he's got speed, he's got dip, he's got hands. I really like what he can bring on this team in particular, with Jeff Hafley in particular. And I just wanted to shout him out, give a special shout out because it's a really cool story. And again, they're probably going to need him at some point. Like, injuries happen. So we'll see if he gets a shot. I'd love to see it. Follow me on Twitter. We'll be back tomorrow. Mike Sando tomorrow, Ty Dunn on Friday. We pushed Sando because too much to talk about on the roster front. So follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. We are still doing our giveaway. Go subscribe. Go follow us on Instagram. Like the post, tag a friend. You're entered to win a Jordan Love jersey. A lot of people are doing it. Many people are saying they'd like the Jordan Love jersey. So go follow us on Instagram and go subscribe on YouTube so you can stay Locked On Packers.